we're going to talk all things cactus care.
All right.
All right, how to water them, how to feed them, how to repot.
Yes.
How about uppot, insects, diseases, and the easiest cacti for beginners. How about that?
We can do it.
We can do that?
We can do that.
All right, let's do it. Let's do it. I'm excited about this.
Good, me too.
All right. So where do you want to start with this?
Well, let's start with the difference between a cactus and a succulent.
Let's do it. Okay.
Because a lot of people would refer to everything on this table as a cactus.
Right.
Would you think these are all cacti?
I would actually think so.
Sure.
I sure would.
Succulent is a broad-reaching term that refers to plants generally from the desert that have fat stems that hold on to water. So all of these have fat stems that hold on to water, because typically they come from places with very little rainfall, so they need to store that rainfall, store that water for when they need it. Technically, a cactus is only in the family Cactus, the Cactaceae family. So all cactus are succulents, not all succulents are cacti.
Ah, got it. Okay.
And the main thing that applies to gardeners that differentiates them is the spines.
It's the spines. All right.
Anything in the cactus family has these little things called areoles, and I'm going to demonstrate because the spines do come off. Areoles are these little bumps, these little spiky little bumps that the spines come out of. And cactus spines hurt
Yes, they do.
and tend to break off in your fingers, and you feel them for hours or maybe even the next day, and that's frustrating. Succulents do not have those type of spines.
So you talked about spines, right? So they're just modified leaves of what they are, right?
That's right. Yes, on the cacti, the spines are modified leaves, and in the wild, the spines act as protection against foraging animals or interfering humans. The spines actually end up casting a little bit of protection from the harsh sun. That is just a tiny little bit of shade. This is a Peruvian old man cactus. And it has even more modifications. These little woolly hairs that cover it provide protection from intense sun and also provide a little bit of cold protection. These guys grow in the wild in the Andes, and it can get pretty cold now and then.
So speaking of cold and sun,
Yes.
so we have these indoors. Where do we need to place them?
Yes. Cacti like sun, for the most part. There are a couple exceptions, but everything I brought here today likes sun. The more sun you can give it, the better. So a bright west window, a south-facing window, either of those would be ideal. You can put it in low light, but eventually the cactus is going to end up stretching for light, called etiolation, as it starts stretching to try to find that light, and you're going to end up with a misshapen cacti. So the more sun, the better.
So more sun, the better. What about humidity? Does that matter?
Humidity doesn't matter a whole lot for these guys. In the wild, they come from places that are pretty arid with low humidity. So any home environment, the humidity is going to be just fine, and the temperature is going to be just fine. Anything that's comfortable for a human to live in is going to be just fine for these cacti to live in too.
So we have to be aware of vents. Want to make sure we don't place them under vents and things like that, right?
Probably not directly under a vent, but if you do have a spot that's under a vent, a cacti is going to be a better choice than one of the leafy tropical houseplants, because cacti are just naturally adapted to withstand that lower humidity and higher heat. So we'll stand up to a tough situation better than a leafy tropical houseplant.
Pretty easy, huh? So far,
that's right.
So far. So let's talk
right.
about watering and feeding next.
Okay. The easiest way to kill a cactus is too much water. And that's generally what happens when somebody says they've got a cactus and it turned into mush. It's too much water. So cacti need to be planted in a well-draining soil, and they need to be in a pot with a drainage hole. For example, each of these is going to have a drainage hole so the water can run out. And the soil that each of these is in is specially made, specially formulated to be a well-draining mix. It has several amendments in it, perlite, vermiculite, pumice, grit, mixed in into the soil to make sure that water runs right through it and the soil can dry out after that. So watering, cacti do not need as much water as our leafy tropical houseplants. During the summer, when they're actively growing, watering once a week should be okay. Maybe once every 2 weeks. In the winter, when the temperature does start to go down and the plants are not getting as much sunlight as during the summer, cacti naturally go into a state of semi-dormancy or complete dormancy. So they're not taking up water.
Okay.
So during the winter, reduce your watering down to either once a month, maybe even once every 3 months.
Wow, really?
It's better to err on the side of little water than too much, especially in the winter for a cacti.
All right. So how would you water them?
So assuming it was summer
Okay.
and or winter and it's time to water, let's say you haven't watered in a month or so and it's time to water your houseplants. Now this is in a pot with drainage holes and it is a fast draining soil mix. I like to water from the top with a cacti. And when you want to water it thoroughly, which means you water it until water comes out the bottom.
Okay.
And in many cases with your tropical houseplants, you might leave it sitting in that water for 30 minutes or so to soak back up. But with a cacti, you don't want that pot to sit in water. So if it's on a tray or a drip pan, any of that water that comes out, you want to go ahead and pour off.
Yeah.
Before you put it back in its windowsill.
Wow, that's good to know.
So that it's not sitting in water.
Gotcha.
You want the roots to be able to dry out as the soil dries out to prevent root rot.
How about that? That's good. So let's talk about feeding them.
Okay.
Right. Who would you use?
Cacti are not heavy feeders. Naturally in the wild, they live in low nutrient soil. So I often use a slow release granular fertilizer. That's just easiest for me in the greenhouse. I tend to use that with most of my plants. So often when I repot a cacti, I will use some of this sprinkled around the top, maybe a third or half as much as I would use with a similar sized tropical houseplant. Or you could use a liquid fertilizer, but only in the spring and summer, which is when cacti are actively growing.
Okay.
And you want to use a fertilizer that is low in nitrogen, which is when you're looking at the NPK or the 3 numbers, you want that first number to be lower than the other numbers.
Okay.
Cacti don't need a lot of nitrogen. They're meant to be slow growing. And if you give them too much of that nitrogen, it encourages fast growth, which is going to be weak and just not good for the plant. So you don't want to give them a high nitrogen fertilizer.
That is good. Okay. So you mentioned repotting.
Yes.
So you want to demonstrate to us how you repot?
Sure.
Cacti?
Set this little guy back. Something to keep in mind when repotting is cacti would like to be in small pots for their size. Another really easy way to kill cacti is moving them to too big of a pot too soon. And the main bad thing about that is water stays in the soil too long.
Okay.
And
Makes
which leads to root rot.
Gotcha.
So I'm going to pot this little guy up. You can see he's kind of at a weird angle in the pot, just sort of with time. And I'm not going to move him up to a huge pot. I'm going to go, this is about 1 pot size larger, which typically when you repot plants, that's recommended, is just one size larger.
And as you're doing that, so when would you repot?
For cacti, in the spring or the summer, don't do it during the winter because they are dormant or semi-dormant, and it's just going to be hard for those roots to spread out and get established in the new soil. So spring or summer is the best time to do this. And cactus can stay in the same pot for a long time.
I believe
so
that.
Maybe every 2 to 3 years or even longer because they are slow growers. So it's going to take them a long time to really start feeling pinched by their roots being too crowded.
Wow, okay.
So cactus do like terracotta pots. The terracotta pots dry out more quickly, which is going to be good for them. It's good to get more airflow into the soil, allow oxygen to get to the roots. So terracotta is a good choice. Obviously, I do have several that are in plastic pots, but especially at home, terracotta is a good choice because it's just going to make sure that the soil dries out well.
Okay, makes sense.
So we're going with this terracotta pot.
Okay.
And it does have a drainage hole.
Good.
Because we need to make sure that water is going to run right through.
All right, so far so good.
Okay.
All right.
And I like to cover the drainage hole with a little bit of pottery shard, which is, I can't help but have some broken terracotta pots around the greenhouse.
I'm sure.
But those pieces make for a great way to set inside and just cover up that drainage hole. And that prevents the soil from running out. You don't have to do that, but this will just help keep the soil from ending up on your counters.
And the water still will run out?
Yes, the water still gets right around that because it's not sitting flush. It's not creating a vacuum seal.
Gotcha.
I'm going to put my gloves
Put
on.
your gloves on, please.
As discussed, they do have spines that will come off in your fingers.
Yeah, they might bite you.
Yes, they certainly can. I have some heavy-duty rose gloves that I often use with cactus as well. So even with my gloves on, I'm going to use another layer. This is a folded paper towel.
Okay.
So I'm going to use that to grip the cacti.
Gotcha.
And
Does it want to come out?
it does not. So I'm going to give it a little encouragement with my handy bamboo
Just a little
stick.
encouragement. Come out of there.
It is easier with a plastic pot because then I can do the squeeze
okay,
method.
Yeah, gotcha.
I feel it loosening.
Oh, good. Yeah, I see it coming out. It's trying. Come out. There you go.
Okay.
Okay.
So here is our cactus root ball.
Okay.
You can see the roots.
Yeah.
Roots a bit on that side. It's not a huge root ball.
not-
They
yeah,
don't. They don't have a huge root system, which is another reason why they don't need to be in a huge pot.
I
They
got
just
it.
don't have a lot of roots. This is also a good time. I'm going to pull off. We have a few little succulents that have taken hold. Okay, so now that we are
Good.
unpotted,
And you would consider that a pretty good root system?
yes,
Okay.
yeah, it's nice and healthy. The roots are white.
Yeah, there.
So the soil is dry, which is what you want most of the time on a cacti. So I brought a soil mix with me, and this is a well-draining soil. It does have amendments mixed into it, some grit, some extra perlite, some extra pumice that make it a well-draining mix to make sure the water is going to run through it and not stay right on these roots.
Yes. So is that something a homeowner could purchase, you think?
Yes,
Maybe
you can
big box
purchase-
stores or nurseries or something
Yes, you can purchase pre-mixed cactus and succulent mix, and usually those are fine. You can also make your own by purchasing the amendments and the soil separately. You just want to make sure that that soil doesn't have an overabundance of sphagnum moss or peat, something that's going to hold onto the water
like that? Okay,
too much.
makes sense.
So I'm going to pour a little bit of soil into the bottom of the pot. Kind of looking for height here. I want it planted at just the same level that it already was. All right, that looks like about the same level that it was in.
Okay.
And I'm comfortable hanging on to it with my gloved fingers now. I'm not having to pull as much as when I was getting it out of the pot. So gingerly holding on to it.
Okay.
That's fine. I'm not pressing the soil down. I'm just getting it settled and into the little crevices between the previous root ball
That was good.
and this one.
Yeah. And I'm glad you're actually demonstrating that because I think, myself included, most homeowners, we don't get the soil up to the level it needs to be. You know,
Right.
so sometimes, you know, maybe it's not
Right.
high enough as it should be. So it's
Good.
good to see that.
Now, as far as fertilizer for a cactus, like I said, they don't need a whole lot. And you can just use some people choose to just use a liquid fertilizer during the spring and summer.
Yeah.
I tend to like using a slow release granular fertilizer.
Yeah.
But like I said, you don't need to use as much as you would on a leafy
Sure.
tropical plant.
Sure.
So I'm just going to use a few granules. And since we reduce watering so much in the winter, that means that the fertilizer will not be released during the winter
Gotcha.
because the cactus is not taking it up anyway. But since there's so little water going through,
Okay.
it's not going to get much of that release.
Good. So if you water that, would you not water as you're putting the soil in, or do you just wait until you finish and then you water?
So generally with most plants, I would wait until after
Okay.
after I plant it, and then a good watering settles everything in.
Sure.
With cacti, because they are so particular about their water needs, when you repot them, that does damage some of the root structure.
Sure.
So it's recommended to wait 10 to 14 days after you repot it before you water it.
Really?
That just gives the roots a chance to settle in a little bit and kind of heal themselves from any broken little bits, because even as gentle as you can try to be, there's always going to be a little bit of damage to the cactus roots.
Wow. Okay.
So it is recommended to wait.
So we wouldn't water that now?
No, we don't need to water it today. We'll wait a week or two and then water it in.
Oh, dear, that's so good. Okay. Yeah, so let's talk about insects or diseases. So
Okay.
are there any insect diseases we need to know about, or anything else, any other problems that you may know
Sure. Insects, in my experience, I do not get as many insects on the cacti.
Okay.
They tend to be a little tougher. They're not as tempting for our pest insects to chew on as our tender tropical houseplants. Scale is something to look out for.
I was going to ask about that.
The dreaded scale insects. So it's important to just examine your cactus. It's easy for scale, mealybugs can be another issue, to hide because they look very much like these little white areoles.
Yes, yes.
So just keep an eye on them and look for the scale in odd places.
Yeah.
If you do discover a scale infection, you can wipe off that scale with a Q-tip dipped in rubbing alcohol.
Okay.
And the best way that I have found in my experience is just to physically wipe off the scale with the Q-tip and the rubbing alcohol. Cacti can be sensitive to pesticides.
Good to know.
So you definitely want to check on that before you douse your plant with chemicals. Cacti just are more special. They're just different than some other plants.
Well, that's easy enough. Yeah, so
Yeah.
what about diseases?
Rust can be an issue occasionally.
Okay.
The best defense is just proper care. If you're not overwatering your cacti and you're giving them good light, they can take care of themselves generally pretty well. So the best way to prevent problems is to give them as much light as possible, well-draining soil, a drainage hole. Don't overwater, especially in the winter.
That's a good point. Okay.
Yeah. And that's going to be your best offense. Is just proper
I like
cactus
that.
care.
So what about the easiest cacti for beginners? How about that?
Okay, the pincushion, the mammillaria. So this is one of the pincushion cacti. This is a pretty easy one, and it multiplies. You can see we have lots of. So this started out with maybe 1 or 3. And as it's been happy, it's been reproducing, so it's been putting off these little offsets. And these can be divided and separated into their own pots, and you could make more cacti that way. So I do like the pincushion cacti.
I think I like that too.
Yeah. This is a hedgehog cacti, the Echinopsis genera. And there are several species, but they all make good, fairly easy cacti houseplants. This Peruvian old man cactus is a popular one. It's very striking. It's not too hard to take care of. This is a golden monkey tail cactus, and it's fairly easy to take care of too. It grows in a very different manner, as you can see from these other guys. This one is columnar and upright, and then we have the little rounded forms. And this grows tall and then will trail. So this can look beautiful in a hanging basket as it gets larger.
I can see that.
Also, the Astrophytum, the bishop's hat cactus, is another easy one for beginners that grows pretty well in houses as well.
How about that? Jill learned so much about cacti.
Good.
And succulents.
Good,
All right, and the difference between the two. Yeah, so thank you so much, for the demonstration and for all the information. It's good to know that.
You're welcome.
Thank you much.
You're welcome.
Thank you much. That was good.